if you don't want to be a leader, go work for a big business where you clock in, clock out. You know, that's just kind of how it is. Like, if I'm hiring you for something, I need you to take charge of it, take leadership of it. This is just how I choose to run my business. Same way I run my life. Like, because my life is a business.
Yeah.
So I was telling Andrew the other day, I was like, look, a relationship is like a business. You know?
Sure, I love that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I elaborated. But in many ways, it is. It's like everybody needs to show up 100%. Everybody needs to show up 100% to this and take ownership and communicate well. And, you know, there's so many crossovers with relationships and business. I feel like my business has taught me a lot. My friends, people who work for me, like, I hold you to your highest potential and I literally will not let you get off of it. And not everybody wants to be held there, and that's okay. But it's like, then you're probably not going to be close to me, and that's totally fine. But that is what I want other people to do for me, always. And the people that do that for me are the people who are close to me. Like, I want you to call me out. I want you to see my blind spots. I want you to push me. I want you to tell me, I think you're thinking too small. I think you need to go for it. Get out of your own way. Like, I want all of that. So I do that for other people. People who work for me, it's not just about getting the job done. It's also a self-development experience. It's a spiritual experience. It's a very activating experience. I know that it turns people's lives upside down in really intense ways. And so there's so much more than just working with me. You know, it really is a big personal development journey. And that's an important thing to me. Kaylan is feeling like she's processing a lot of people's emotions. Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, sure.
I feel like a therapist.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Tell me about your emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm really learning the nuances and the layers of what it feels like to process things for other people right now. And really going into that and really feeling the distinction. You know, it's so interesting. I just thought of this too. The Oracle said a couple of weeks ago to notice where we have resistance to other people's emotions. And that cracked open a whole new thing for me too, because especially with my partner, I'm so intricately connected to his energy. And, you know, for a long time, we would have fights about that because I would be like, you can't come in my space with that energy. And I would tell him, like, I know that technically, like, I could, you know, hold the stronger vibration and be like, I'm vibing here. It doesn't matter, like, what you come with. But this is my boundary, like, for now. Like, please don't come into my space or my room or, like, come at me with that energy. And then when the Oracle said that, I was like, oh, I'm simply just having resistance to it. It's not really about, you know, anything else. It's just, I feel this energy that feels uncomfortable. I can just not have resistance to it and let it flow through me the same way that I would if it were mine. So yeah, just really leaning into those nuances of what we do when we're really feeling the collective energy strongly, and even specifically like people close to us and they're going through things.
I think it's such a nuanced conversation because there is the whole piece of curating your energy field. And I certainly have my own boundaries with that, right? To your point, like, don't come into my space with that. If somebody is consistently choosing to be at a different vibration and I'm feeling that, and at the same time, there's the very real, I feel other people's energy and I can notice it and not take it on as my own, or things that I am feeling in my body. Can I just release that and move that and be done with it? And this has been coming up a lot for a lot of people, even within our team, around realizing how much is not really ours. Yeah. And I think all of it's true, you know, because I have noticed that there have been long periods of my life where I was really frustrated with the way that I was feeling and feeling like my tools weren't working and making it a me problem. And then I eventually realized it was about a specific person I was very connected to, and I did need to release it. And that was my body, my energy body, my emotional body telling me this isn't in alignment because I'm feeling this, right? And at the same time, that's very different, kind of this chronic low frequency you're feeling related to somebody compared to, okay, I live with somebody or I'm very close to them and they're going through an emotional time and so I'm feeling that with them. And so I think it is a nuanced conversation because there is we got to release resistance to it and realize it's just kind of our work here. And I think that's the conversation I have with a lot of people who are very intuitive and empaths where they spend so much time in resistance to it. And I just want to turn it off. I don't want to feel people. And guess what? You're going to. And you can either use that as a gift or you can not like it and resist it and make it harder for yourself. But learning how to work with it really is the game changer. And I think that's kind of the nuanced piece of, you know, how do I work with this? And it's not an all or nothing. It's not always I have to process everything for everybody else. Sometimes it is a signal. If it's chronic, maybe there's a vibration, a chord here that isn't resonant with me anymore. So I think that is a big thing for people to explore for themselves and know your own boundaries with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like, you know, it's, that's something that I've been thinking about recently. Like, am I really, practicing the energetic protection that I need to, for me? And, you know, someone in the community was asking about cord cutting. So that's kind of relevant with this. Like when you're leaning into that and when you realize, okay, there is a cord here that's no longer resonant, how do you approach that?
I clear it.
Yeah.
I clear my cords all the time. And I know cord cutting is, I feel like this is a controversial thing in the spirituality space, which I think everything now is controversial at this point because everybody's just trying to make a post to get some likes. Everybody just wants to be the most controversial possible. And people will do that because they're trying to be technical about it. And the thing is, when I talk about a lot of these concepts and try and use language where people can understand the energetic, I'm not so concerned about the technicality because if you can help people understand, they can eventually go deeper into the technicality. And so no, it's not necessarily like that you're cutting a cord. Really what you're doing is you're either unhooking or you're burning or you're removing the piece connected within the energy body and then refilling and sealing that up, you know? So it's not just a snip, right? And so people get all, you know, up about it. But yeah, I personally am a big fan of clearing out everybody's energy. And the people that are meant to be in my life, we reform those cords and those energetic connections anyway. So it's not that things won't grow. You know, I'm releasing things that aren't serving me. And if I try and release something that is serving me and I pull it out and it's meant to be there, it's just going to regrow. But I find that that's a way for me that I actually can keep long-term relationships fresh and healthy because we're not keeping the same cord. And it's similar to when you have a friend or a partner or somebody who's going to be in your life for a long time and there comes a point where you need to update the contract. We've been talking about that in the membership. How do you with the same person update the contract? And I find that when I'm doing a lot of this clearing of my field and like releasing those cords, so to speak, I less often have to do these kind of larger, we're closing this contract kind of ceremony and opening up a new one. So that's something that I feel like has allowed me to have a lot of extremely close, very long-term friends through so many different phases of my life, is kind of keeping that clear. And it also allows me to just see more clearly what's going on with my relationships. And I do know that one of the things that can be triggering about me to be in any type of relationship with me is that I am very detached. And that's something that definitely has triggered a lot of people that I've dated. It's triggered a lot of friendships where I'm just very simply like, if it's not in alignment anymore, it's not in alignment anymore. That doesn't have to mean either of us are bad or wrong. It is what it is. And we can move forward and send you lots of love. And that can be very triggering for people because they find a lot of safety in attachment. Yeah. And people are so afraid to cut the cord, whether that's technically, energetically, or that's, you know, kind of emotionally, and what that means metaphorically, it all being kind of the same. And I think it just kind of mirrors back to us, our own relationship with safety, right? And where we think that attaching to something is going to keep us safe, where it's actually not. It actually keeps us out of safety in our own bodies because we're attached to things that we've outgrown, and that can lead to a lot of non-resonance. So yeah, I mean, I cut it, I clear it, and I see what quote regrows or what doesn't go away, or, you know, what stays with me. And in my first book, Manifestation Mastery, they talk a lot about, you know, like you're a balloon, cut all the weights and just let yourself float. And then you watch what other balloons float alongside you. And that's a really good visual, I think. And that's how I think about myself and my life. And especially through periods, like we've talked a lot about this rebirth and a lot of the changes that I made recently and going through those different phases throughout my life. And every time I've made a huge pivot, because I've done this many times, and it's been a whole rebrand. It's been a whole, I close almost every relationship I have. A lot of those have gone with physical moves, which I guess this one did too. You know, it's like this thing that I've done multiple times in my life where I get rid of everything I own. I move to a new city. I complete most of the relationships in my life. I rebrand myself. I have a whole new business. It's like everything. It's very dramatic. And that is one way for me to be very crystal clear about who's meant to stay with me.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people stay in the same city, they stay in the same job, they stay in the same industry, they stay in the same friend group. They keep doing the same things because they're afraid. They are afraid, if I do something else, I'm going to lose these friends. And that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. That if you do lose those friends,
you were supposed to.
Yeah. You know, and that doesn't have to, we have all this judgment around it and attachment around it, and it's okay. And that's a totally normal thing. I'm sure everybody can think of people who they have nothing but so much love for, who you just kind of fell out of touch. Nothing happened, you know, maybe you moved, you just kind of stopped talking, life got busy, and it's not like anything bad happened. You just kind of changed. And if they called you up today, you'd be like, yeah, I would love to chat. Let's hang out. And so I think that there's a lot of room for us to learn to live more like that in general. So, you know, I'm a fan of releasing it and just seeing who wants to stick around.
I love that. And I love that, you know, it brings in the conversation about the attachment itself, because it's like you're clearing everything, trusting that, like you said, what's meant to stay and renew and regrow will.
Yeah.
I hadn't ever really thought about it like that when talking about clearing and cutting and all of these things, you know, and yeah, to your point too, like it can grow back in a new way, even if it's the same person. It could be an updated contract. So yeah.
Which I will just add, and people who are in the community have heard me say this, but this is a really helpful thing to do with our parents. People really struggle with this. Those are a lot of, when you look at just kind of the classic baseline, you know, we're not getting anywhere too complicated yet with the energy body, and a lot of people's blocks are connected to things related to their parents, the mother wound, the father wound. And people will say, you know, I have this cord with my mother I need to clear. And you're not going to completely clear the cord with your mother, but you can transmute it. Well, I won't say that. You can, but in some ways you can't. It's nuanced. We won't get into it, but we can, you know, clear out those specific cords related to the mother, right? Those certain energies, those certain memories, those aspects that are tying you together. And that offers space for a new cord to, I don't know if I want to say even grow, but the healthy cord that already is there underneath the other stuff, for that to become the main cord. And that's really helpful for people to understand about people who are going to be, well, I won't even say that, but who, if there's somebody who you feel like they are going to be part of my life and I want to upgrade this relationship, that's part of how that can work, you know, clear it all and allow the kind of, I call it like the healthier strands to grow and to take place. And I've seen that literally thousands of times completely transform people's relationships with family specifically. That's a big one. Because I know people can struggle with that. So that's something else to keep in mind too.
Yeah. And obviously you teach this in so many ways. And like when you're teaching Ahai, you teach people how to clear things, and in psychic development course and everything like that. But high level, in case people don't know, what does the Christina clearing process look like for you? Because, you know, like if, to your point earlier, like if something feels really stuck and it takes you a while, like what does that look like when you're like, oh, there's something here, I need to give it an extra oomph when I'm clearing?
Like if I'm doing energy work, I mean, well, I'm using Ahai, obviously. You know, I go into the energy body, I do a psychic scan, I see all the places where is the energy actually stuck. And depending on where it's stuck and how it's stuck, I'll, you know, burn it, transmute it, move it somewhere else, take it out. Like they do, like the way that I do it with my guides is like literally surgery. So that there will be, some of my guides will stand next to me with a bucket, and it's literally like, we're doing surgery, I pull it out and put it in the bucket.
Yeah.
And at the end, you know, they clear what's in the bucket. So I do it that way. You know, cords, I will do, it depends on the cord. If it's a hook, if it's like, some look like swords, some look like wooden poles stuck in people, you know, so every quote cord is different. And depending on what it looks like, I have to do something different, you know, but in general, let's say it's a lot of unhooking and a lot of cutting those cords, clearing those cords, like I said, it's kind of that 2-part process of, if it's a cut, then it's a removal of the part that is in the energy body. And then you want to seal that up and fill that back up with what you want, you know? And so I'm looking at any cords or kind of attachments, but then I'm also looking at what's within the energy body that's resonant with something that's no longer serving me. So kind of both of those. Obviously, Archangel Michael can be a huge help, or any specific guides people work with. So my guides will come in and help me too. And you know, there's all kinds of things you can use. Visualizations, you can use selenite wand, you can use your pendulum to cut to clear cords as well. You can just use your hands and pull things out. You know, so for me, I'm more of, I'm a hand person. I do it like that, and use Ahai, and that's kind of, that's what I do.
Yeah, beautiful. You were talking too about the updating contracts and like what happens with that with people. I'm curious too, some people in the community were asking about business. So like, how do you navigate when maybe your business and you have an updated contract, or maybe, you know, you're going along and everything's flowing and then you experience a block within your business? How do you perceive those blocks? If they are felt, have they ever been like trickier? And how do you navigate that when something is coming up that just feels like a block and it feels like you have to pivot within the business?
Yeah, it happens all the time. I know somebody had, I forget what their specific question was, but I think the thing about being an entrepreneur is you have to be committed to the mindset of there are no problems, just solutions.
Yeah.
You know, there are no problems, there are just opportunities.
Yeah.
And that is what it is to have a company, let alone multiple. There's always something to pivot or to move. It's just a ton of opportunities. And I think that if you're looking for something to start, to get into, and to never have to face a challenge, then you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. That's it. It is personal development constantly, all the time. It's big mirroring. It's huge for growth. And that's why I like it, you know, because everything in my life I like to optimize, like to get deeper into. I want to go further. I want to push the boundaries. Like I don't want to just find something and have it keep staying that way all the time. And so that's part of what I love the most about it. I like to push those edges. And so all the time there are things that might feel like a block. And there's a few ways I perceive that. First, I'll just notice it because there's something in the 3D that's obvious. There's a block here. So maybe it's, I'm not feeling inspired. I'm not feeling lit up. Or it might be financially, this isn't flowing. Like it's just not landing. There's no energy around it. And the thing is that the bigger piece of how I perceive a block is really my energy related to it more than what it's looking like in the 3D. And so there have been times where I will just know this is it. Like we're on it. Like the energy's moving, even if in the 3D, the numbers aren't coming in, and I'll tell people on the team, I'm like, doesn't matter. This is it. Like I know, because I can feel the energy is moving around it. But sometimes it is very much, you know, we put this out and not many people are biting, or those posts aren't landing very well. But I'm really looking more for, is my energy flowing in relation to it? Am I excited to show up? Is my magnetism there? Because if mine is there, then the only thing that can happen is it's going to move within the business. If I'm feeling a block or a stuckness, and it's just a feel like that's an emotion, I will obviously think about it logically, and I will go in with Ahai and I'll do energy work on the business, and I'll look at what are the actual blocks there, and I'll kind of check all my angles in the back end vibrationally if it's connected to, sometimes it's connected to people who work for me. Sometimes it is. And that's not always easy, but this is one of the things I talk about with all of my clients. It's like, you have to be aware of every person's hands who are inside your business. And that's not a judgment. That's just understanding that people sometimes bring their own stuff, and that can affect the company at large. And this is about the company at large and the larger mission. It's not about just making sure everybody in the company feels safe and secure. And I think that's a bigger piece that I could go off about, but is a big thing I'm having so many conversations with friends about, is the way that people are showing up in businesses. I think people need kind of like a reality check nowadays. I think people have gone so out of kind of like professionalism and lost a big sense of taking responsibility for something bigger than themselves. I think that's a big thing that's happened in like these younger generations, ours included, where people just don't want to be part of something bigger or take responsibility for something bigger, right? And that impacts the whole business. And people have to understand, like, this is about the mission, not just do I feel comfortable right now? It's not about your comfort. Everybody has to be on the same page, you know? So I'm looking at everybody whose hands are touching my business, whether it's somebody consistently or just even a contract we've brought in, like, you know, everybody I hire for everything, like, I actually care a lot more about your energy than how long you've been doing this, your expertise, you know? Obviously I want that too, but those are all factors that are really important. And then I'm looking at structurally what's set up, you know, what's out of alignment, with the larger mission. And sometimes, especially in my business, there have been phases where, you know, the purpose of the company has changed over time. And it's like, okay, we finished that, and now we're got to change this and upgrade this. I mean, my company, it's the same LLC. I started in nutrition and health, and it was about helping people with their physical vessels and with people healing from chronic illness and taking their power back in that way. And then it turned into all business coaching, right? And financial stability, I would say. And it was helping people. Yeah, there's a similar through line the whole way through, but those are kind of different angles. And then into spirituality, and as we went there were still different angles to kind of the mission and the purpose, whether it has been helping people activate their intuitive gifts or helping people learn how to manifest. And now it's so much more about this multidimensionality and how to actually live this. And that's a very different energy than what it was even a year ago, for sure. So I'm always looking at, hey, company, because you are a consciousness. What are you looking for? Why are you here? What do you need from me? How can I co-create with you and collaborate with you? And sometimes the business tells me things that my ego doesn't want to hear, but it is what it is. So that's how I work the business. I talk to the business like a spirit guide, because it has its own energy. And I'll see businesses like a building is usually how I see it. And that gives me a lot of information about its capacity, how it's running, the vibe, the frequency. You know, I'll have some clients who their business is like, it looks like the Willy Wonka factory, and somebody else who looks like Tony Stark's home, like steel, like coal. You know, it's like, it's very different. You know, some businesses have a lot of people coming in and out. Some are more like, I'm in a glass house and watch me, you know? So I'm learning a lot about what that building looks like is how they show it to me, and what things look like in the different rooms of the building and the back end and all that, and the cords connected to it. And so a lot of times when it looks like things are not flowing or things are stuck, there's either a mismatch between what the actual mission is of the business now and what the offers are, what people are doing. Sometimes it could be just one offer, one product out of alignment, and we've got to remove that. Sometimes it's a lot of cords from old energies, old versions of yourselves. Sometimes it's people in the audience that are ready to, you know, move on. Sometimes it's, hey, we've built all this stuff, but we're not visible. We're not really making ourselves visible. And so there's a lot that we can clear around that to access visibility, you know. And that's the thing about marketing that's so interesting. And I've seen this a million times. There will be companies that have great branding, great content, great product, and they're doing, quote, all the right things, and it's not landing. And you look at their business energetically, and it's like there's a curtain around it, and we remove the curtain, and they don't change anything in the 3D, and suddenly everybody's coming in because people can finally see them. And that is something in everyday life that I just want to point out to people. It's like, this comes up for a lot of people in dating. They feel like, I just had a friend tell me, she said, I feel like men just don't see me. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, hi, and I'm like open, and like they just don't see me. And that can be a really common thing, whether that's, again, in your business or with dating or with making new friends, like people just kind of not seeing you. And you got to ask yourself, where do I kind of have that veil over me, intentionally or unintentionally, to keep people out because I'm scared of being seen, or because I think I'm not ready, because of something I've said in the past, like some unconscious vow I made to myself, things like that. And when we clear that, suddenly people see you. And so those are all different things I look at. But I think I don't know. I kind of want to bring it a little more tangible for people, because what was the exact question? It was like, how do you navigate blocks in the business?
Yeah. How do you navigate blocks in the business?
Here's the thing. I have to change something.
How did you solve or navigate through them?
Yeah. So I have to change something. And sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes it's going straight and energetically and just I get the information of what I need to change. And it's usually getting rid of certain things and then updating other things. I mean, this sounds so surface level to people, but maybe you can speak to this too. And I will say something I have always honestly kind of struggled with my business is, like, I know what needs to happen energetically, and things that I think are priorities, I will have people that are working with me not think are priorities, because they don't understand why it's a priority. And in their head, they're like, no, this is a priority. And I'm like, no, this is the priority. And so recently it was branding. And this has been something that I've been going off about for a while, and it just wasn't happening. And I kept saying, like, nothing is going to move until you change this. Yeah. Because even if things are fine, if it's not resonant with what I'm saying, it literally doesn't work. It literally doesn't land. And so we did this whole rebrand, and I'm telling you, it was like the sea parted. Like, it was like the sky opened and the sea parted. I certainly felt like all these new ideas started coming in. I got a ton of energy back. I could see a lot more clearly. Like, the energy just suddenly moved. And I think you guys felt that too. Like, everybody felt different. And you don't always realize how much something like that is holding you back until you finally release it, whether it's an offer or a branding, because that's the thing, is that's a vibrational container of the entire business. It's like, I mean, you know what it is? It's like somebody who's incredible, and let's say they're trying to meet new people, or let's say they're trying to meet they want to date, and let's say that they don't take care of the way they look, and that might sound really surface level to people, and it's not about like how you look, but there's something to presenting yourself with a level of self-expression so people can see who you are and can determine if you're resonant or not, right? The more you are, the more you express yourself, people can see you as a person more clearly. And that's a way that people hide or can't fully be seen, whether it's they're just like not taking care of the way they look, or they are dressing like all their friends dress instead of the way that they really want to dress, right? And so there's like that vibrational mismatch that acts like a cloak over you, and people can't really see you. And that sounds like such a surface level thing, but I'm telling you, I see this so often for people with dating, and I will literally say to my client, I'm like, you dress like all your friends. Like, and I know that sounds so surface level. It's not like you look great, but you dress like your friends, and like the way you dress is not who you are. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And that can be a real, because it's confusing. It's confusing. It's like, let's take it back to the building example, right? Let's say inside is Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and there's all these brightly colored, delicious sweets and chocolates and treats, and it's fun, and there's song and dance and all kinds of things going on. And the outside is, broken windows, and it's mismatched paint, and it looks like a dump on the outside. No one's going to come in. Right? Or even let's say the outside is, let's go back to that, just like steel, hard, cold metal building, right? No one's going to come in or think that inside, like what's inside is what's inside. And some people like that. And there's not saying there's never a place for that kind of mystery, or if you're looking to veil that. I have some friends who have an epic podcast studio and gym, and it's like this whole building, super cool setup, and the front of the building is completely hidden. Like, it looks like, the first time I walked by it, I thought it was just a closed, dumpy old building, and I was like, this is the address. And they do that because they don't want anybody to know where it is. But in our everyday lives, if we're looking for attraction, we don't want to hide in that way. And it's confusing for people because it's kind of like, who are you? Are you this or are you that? And we want to be sending out a clear signal, So my point is, how do I navigate business blocks is I have to change something. I have to change something, and I have to change something drastically to get the energy moving. And it's like, an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in motion. And so I need to push the ball really hard somewhere, because if I change something, it doesn't even matter if it's the right thing, it will help me see what else I need to change next. It's like unknotting a pile of necklaces. Like I just have to start somewhere and then I'll start to see where to go next. So I changed something, and I think, I don't know if you have off that like a specific example. It's easier for me. Like these are very general, if it's like specifically like, was there a block with this and how did you navigate that? Because it's always different. But yeah, I've navigated, there's always blocks that we come up against, and I have to be a good problem solver. And, part of that has also been us learning how to like collaborate with each other and hiring the right people who can also solve problems, and having a team where people are excited for the challenges and the opportunities instead of not, because some people aren't. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of general, but it's a general question. So.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that I feel like are really potent from that. First, I'll just say really quickly about the whole like who's working for you thing. It's so important. And like, me coming from the other side of working for you, it's like the people have to be lit up and inspired by and like have the same level of accountability, because the biggest thing that I think that I've learned from you specifically with work is the leadership piece. And it's like, if you're holding people to that level of leadership, like they have to be willing to go there, and that's, there's going to be people that aren't willing to go there with themselves, and that's fine. That's where they're at. There was a time where I wasn't ready to go there with myself, because it's like, once what happens in one area of our lives happens in all of it. So it's like, if I'm taking this level of accountability and leadership for myself and my work, I'm going to be doing it everywhere. And that means that I got homework, so definitely. And it's like, it's a metaphor for just like everything else with relationships. Like you can love someone and be aligned in other ways, but that doesn't mean that they have to work for you or that they have to work for you forever.
Oh, totally. And I have had to navigate that because I have had many friends working for me, and that's not, I try not to do that. Like that's not my preference at all. I try to avoid that actually. But I've had to navigate that dynamic many times, and thankfully I've learned enough where usually it all like unfolds positively, but that's can be a big thing that happens in businesses. And I grew up, like we have like my mom's whole side. I'll say like a family business, like a larger company. And I worked there for a while. Like everybody in my family has worked there, and everybody who works there is like, they're all families basically. And so I grew up like with the building of this company, that became a very large company, and watched all of those family dynamics and those interpersonal dynamics. It was really like every single employee at that company, like these are the same people you're hanging out with on the weekends. Yeah. We were like a big family, and I watched my mother, especially because she was handling like the HR and that whole side, like navigating how do you run in a business and there's 50 employees here, and everybody is so tightly interwoven and married to each other, children, cousins, like, and how do you navigate that when there's very real work problems? And so I'm really grateful for everything I learned just watching that and kind of being a part of that. And also, I have a lot of friends who navigate this as well. It's a really common thing. People listen to the podcast know that, like, building a business with your sibling, or all of your friends. And I've seen the pitfalls to that, and the positives of it, because I do think a really important piece, and I talked about this in Money Codes a lot, like all the things I think about when it comes to hiring. I think that hiring is such a skill, and it's something that is like has been the hardest skill for me to learn. I'm still learning a lot, and I'm grateful for everything I have learned, but it's like learning how to hire better. And there has to be that level of telepathic understanding between people. Like there really just does. Yeah. Especially, well, I'm talking about from the type of business I run. Right. Like if you're running something that's more like startup or small business, I'm not talking about like large company industry dynamics. And I also understand that like I have to be very real with myself about what it's like to step into a business like mine. And I know it's not for everybody. Like some people would absolutely hate it. I feel like you either hate it or you love it. Like it's a fast-paced environment. Yeah. And it's also, you have to be so okay with my intuitive chaos, you know, in my, like, we're changing this, like, we're turning this over, you know, and I know I do that a lot, but it's just how it goes. And I definitely need everybody to care just as much as me. Like, that's the most important thing. And there has to be that level of like telepathy between us, 100%. But I do require that level of leadership. Like, if you don't want to be a leader, go work for a big business where you clock in, clock out. You know, that's just kind of how it is. Like, if I'm hiring you for something, I need you to take charge of it, take leadership of it. And I do, like, the way that I run my business, and this is just how I choose to run my business, same way I run my life, like, because my life is a business.
Yeah.
That's what I was telling. So I was telling Andrew the other day, I was like, look, our relationship is like a business. You know?
Sure, I love that.
Yeah. Well, you know, I elaborated. But in many ways, it is. It's like everybody needs to show up 100%. Everybody needs to show up 100% to this and take ownership and communicate well. And, you know, there's so many crossovers with relationships and business. I feel like my business has taught me a lot. But the way that I run my life, and some people don't like this, and that's okay, they don't need to be in my life, is I do hold everybody in my life to a high standard. I do. Like, my friends, of course, my clients, but my friends, people who work for me, like, I hold you to your highest potential, and I literally will not let you get off of it. And not everybody wants to be held there, and that's okay. But it's like, then you're probably not going to be close to me, and that's totally fine. But that is what I want other people to do for me, always. And the people that do that for me are the people who are close to me. Like, I want you to call me out. I want you to see my blind spots. I want you to push me. I want you to tell me, I think you're thinking too small. I think you need to go for it. Get out of your own way. Like, I want all of that. So I do that for other people. And it can be a very intense environment for people, for sure. I mean, my friends and I talk about this. Like, we're like, yeah, it's an intense environment to be friends with us. But that is what I like, and that's what helps me grow. And that has helped me continue to learn. So, you know, that's the thing. I think about people who work for me. It's not just about getting the job done. It's also a self-development experience. It's a spiritual experience. It's a very activating experience. I know that it turns people's lives upside down in really intense ways. And so there's so much more than just working with me. You know, it really is a big personal development journey. And that's an important thing to me. Yeah.
It's a wild, beautiful, crazy experience for sure. The other thing when you were talking that I was just thinking about was specificity. And to your point about, you know, branding and really figuring out, like, what is the intention of what we're bringing through now, and is this still aligned with old energy or not? You know, and I think a lot of times maybe people get tripped up on, like, they don't want to be too specific, because it's like, you really have to commit when you're going, like, when you're narrowing down your intention, because, and this kind of makes me think of, like, everything that the Oracle talks about mission too. It's like, you can love something within your business and it can still not be it. You know, it can still not be exactly the narrow intention that you're pushing everything towards. And everyone within the business has to also understand that. And I think that that's also where, you know, the branding conversation comes from. It's like, exactly what vibration do we want people to feel within this container? And that is such a big part of branding, which is why, you know, and I told you this in our meeting right after we rebranded, it's like, I felt so inspired. Like, suddenly it was like everything, because obviously a big part of my role in the business is creativity. And it's like, because the container was so broad, I mean, because it's one of those things, it's like, yes, I could walk outside and be inspired by 5 million things, but like, do I really want to do that? No, that sounds very overstimulating. You know what I mean? Like, but if you're like, let's go to the beach and just focus on the sound of the waves. Then it's like, that's meditation, right? And so being very specific with exactly the container that we're calibrating to is so important, especially when, like, there's creation involved.
100%. I mean, this is the struggle of working with creative minds, right? Like, everybody gets off track. Everybody is ADHD. Everybody's all over. I'm like, how the hell what were you talking about? How did we get here? Like, you start a meeting about this project and suddenly you've thought of 5 other projects, and we do, you know, so what helps me, because I'm like that too. Like, my brain is like that. And so I write everything down, and I have all of those documents in a folder for myself and I filter my decisions through that. And that's true with hiring. I have a very specific AF document about all of the traits I'm looking for. And every time I'm hiring, you know, I can make my own, I feel really great about this. But then I go back to that document and I go through, are there any checks? And I have to be very real about myself, because sometimes there's somebody who I really feel strongly about, but there's that thing I wrote down that is very important and I know I need in my business. And so I have to trust that list, you know, and every time I veer it, and sometimes that list needs to be updated, right? Of course. But every time I veer, I'm like, I wrote that down in a good state of mind without the emotional connections I formed with different people. I need to trust that. And it's the same thing with the mission. And so I would say every year at least, if not more, but every year at least, I go back to, I have a large document where it's like, what is the mission of the company and how do we fulfill this? And how many people are we trying to reach and in what way specifically? And then all of the words that kind of relate to the energy and how I want people to feel specifically, things like that. And I go through and I filter my decisions through that list. And that's the thing about, you know, I have all kinds of creative ideas as you know, we all do in the business. And I have to go back and say, is this in alignment with the mission though? Yeah. Right. Because I might get an idea like, oh, we can make this course and it'd do well and people would love it. But I look back at my mission. I'm like, is this getting me off track? And the thing is that, I mean, we could do lots of podcasts about how I am very proud of everything I've created at such a young age. Like I have done a lot. I've done a lot more than people have done, you know, being an entrepreneur for 50 years. And I mean, we're on book 5 and I just started writing books like 2.5 years ago. Like that's pretty good, you know, and we're not stopping. And there's a method to my madness. The way that I'm able to produce so much is that I am very focused. I have a large list of ideas, and I would say 90% of my ideas, they just stay an idea because they are off track. Like they are a distraction. And there's nothing wrong with the distraction. Like I could go veer off and do it, but if I did that, I would not have my 5 books. I would not have my publishing house. I would not have my product line. I would not have, you know, the 2 other companies that I built and then sold. Like I would not have all of that. I would get distracted. And that's where people end up like, oh, I've been wanting to write that book for 5 years and I still haven't done it. And it's like, people feel like that all the time. And the only difference between people who do it and don't is if you prioritize it. And so I have learned that I have to check myself with my priorities. And there are a lot of things that look like bright, shiny objects that maybe sound fun. And I have to come back to, is this in alignment with this document, this mission? Is it actually getting us further in relation to this goal? And or is my goal different now? Because that can be the other thing too, right? If I am seeing a lot of bright, shiny objects and those are lighting me up and the stuff that's in alignment, quote unquote, with the mission, I'm tired, I don't feel excited about, then maybe we need to, maybe the contract's up with that iteration and maybe we did it, you know? So those are really helpful things for me to write it down, and say, you know, is this on track or is it not? And I think also just being bold enough to even communicate that way. Like I have to be, I think sometimes, and I'm not as tough as I could be, but with you, like you guys can get off track, you know, and I'm like, bring it back. Like it has to be very targeted, very specific. And that's an important, I mean, we've been talking about this a lot, like divine masculine. Like I told you all, you know, we're going to work a lot on your divine masculine because that's what we need in the business. And that's about staying focused and staying clear and what is the goal. And that doesn't mean we can't do those other fun things, but let's allot time for those. Let's be constructive with those. Let's maybe do those later. Let's think about how is that moving the needle, you know? So it is the specificity that drives us forward. And I know that a lot of people, and myself included, like we can struggle to pick a thing. And this is like one of the most common things I hear. And it's like, at the end of the day, how I feel about it is just pick a thing and go with it. You have to give something momentum. You have to stick to it and give it momentum, and people will try something. It's not taking off, or they get overwhelmed and then they stop and they try something else. And they're just doing a lot of task switching. And the same way task switching is not helpful in your, you know, daily life, like day to day, it's not helpful in your overall life either. Like pick something and stick with it, and know you can always change your mind later. Like you can, I mean, look at all the different iterations of business I've run in totally different areas. And I was only able to do that because it was like, hey, nutrition, hit this hard for 2 years. And I hit it hard and I built it big. And then I was like, I want to do something else. And then I hit that hard and I built it big. But if I was trying to build all 3 of those angles at the same time, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. And so I do think there's just kind of that. I mean, it's that tough love of like, just pick one and go with it. And I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack around that with why are people afraid to be specific, and it's because they're afraid to choose wrong.
Right.
And I find that again with people manifesting relationships, I'm like, but what do you want in a partner? And they'll tell me, I'm like, that could be anyone. Like it's not, and they don't want to get specific. Like, well, I don't want to limit myself. I'm like, no, you just don't want to take responsibility for your reality. That people who don't want to manifest specifically are afraid to take responsibility, because it's easier if you're non-specific, someone else decides for you, it doesn't go the way you want, and then you can blame, well, it happened to me, well, somebody else decided. But the second you said, I asked for these things on a silver platter and I got it, if that doesn't work out the way that you want it to, then who do you look at? Me. I chose it. And people are so afraid of taking responsibility for themselves that they don't choose anything, and then the needle never moves. Here's the thing. There have been all kinds of things I choose specifically that happen in my life. I manifest them, I create them, whatever. And it doesn't always go the way I want. And who cares? They gave me a lot of information. I had to do that to then learn, oh, those very specific things I thought I wanted, that didn't go the way I wanted. That is still working for me. And so I can go back and do the same thing again. And so I do think that's a really important, I mean, we're circling back to what I was saying earlier, like, you know, why are you afraid to take responsibility? Why are you afraid to be the one who has control? And that's the only way you're going to create the life you want, if you're okay with having control.
Yeah, it's such a good full circle moment because of that, you know, and it does show up in like literally every single area of life. This aspect of taking responsibility or not. And again, that's something that I've learned from you so much, because it's like, I feel like once you start to see it, you see all of the ways in which you also were not doing it. Yeah. And you were just kind of waiting for it to happen, because the truth is sometimes, you know, there are contracts that like, it's going to hit you like it or not. It's just going to come in. Yeah. But a lot of times, and this comes also for asking for it, you know, like you this is something you also say all the time, you know, our spirit guides are ready to act and ready to give us a lot of things. And if we don't ask for them, we're not opening up the portal for it to come through, you know? And so, yeah, like we just have to be willing to look at those things and to actually take the responsibility. Something you said earlier about the whole like getting distractions in ADHD reminded me of something too. You know, this is something that I've really been just leaning into ever since the Oracle the first time was like, well, ADHD, you guys could call it that, but it's really just the psychic sensitivity, you know? And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. It's a whole thing, but I think it's so interesting because it goes back to what we were talking about the energetic protection and clearing. And it's like the times that I feel the most overstimulated, the most distracted, the most like, I don't know where I'm going, is the times that I haven't taken the time to center, to clear, to ground. And, you know, I just think that correlation is so strong. And, you know, we were talking about it earlier, specifically with like creativity. Yeah. If I walk outside and I don't know what to focus on, sure, I could see the beauty and everything, but I'm really just going to feel overwhelmed, you know? And so what do you think about that correlation, and how do you kind of navigate that? And when you're feeling all of these, you know, if you feel overstimulated, and kind of how do you navigate that?
Like, how do I navigate when I feel overstimulated? Yeah. So the interesting thing for me that I've realized is I feel the most overstimulated when I am in a place I've been.
Really?
What I mean by that is because I create a lot of associations and a lot of like, there's a lot of energy being held. How do I describe this? So for example, every time I travel, I'm way more focused. Like it is, I will get much better work done. And I was thinking about this. I was going to talk to you guys about this. Like I actually think for every big project, and we already know this when it comes to writing books for me, but like almost with everything, even with, you know, as we're redoing Ahai, I am so much better off if I go to an Airbnb for the weekend or for the week and work on it. If I, you know, and it could be a close trip, a far trip, whatever. But when I'm out of my space, I'm so much more focused. And I was thinking about that as well with, you know, I work my best totally alone. Like I don't work well with friends. I'm not the kind of person that I'm like, let's go to a coffee shop and work. I cannot focus. And I notice this as well with places where that I frequent. You know, like coffee shops I go to all the time, or even places around San Diego where when I go there to work, I'd be so overstimulated because I had built associations and I almost had like chords and memories and and emotions attached to those places. And since I've moved and now that I come back, I'll go to the same place where I used to work and feel like I can't focus here. I got to go back home into my room and I'll go back there now and I'm just zeroed in and I can focus because it's almost like I cleared all of those associations. And so for me, it's about like getting out of my space or places that holds a lot of memories, or even with, this sounds so simple, but using new mugs, getting a new journal. Like there's something about when I get a new journal, new ideas come in. And for me, it's that newness, it's that change. That's the same thing, you know, whenever you want newness in your life, do new things, you know, go a different route, like change it up. And that switch up for me actually allows me to focus a lot more because I'm a lot more present. I'm not falling into habits or vibrational templates I already had or memories I already have. And so for me, I actually focus a lot better when I'm like anything that's new or changing. And so I've noticed when I'm in a new environment, it's actually very helpful, whether or not it's crowded, to be honest. Other times when I'm overstimulated, I mean, obviously just anything I can do to just get kind of in my own field, in my own bubble. And that's like, I'll go back to human design caves. Like, how can I create a cave for myself, which is often a corner? Like, is there a darker area? There's something about, you can create a cave for yourself in a sea of people, right? It's like suddenly like a crowded coffee shop, like you're just, no one's paying attention to you. And so I think about how can I create a cave for myself? And yeah, obviously like the clearing, the energetic protection, all of that, like kind of my own bubble. I like to use sound, you know, I mean, this is nothing groundbreaking, but headphones, right? And putting binaural beats in and and everybody knows that, but I just want to describe like the energetic of that. Like what that is that's me creating my own cave. That's me creating my own bubble. It's not about distracting the noise with the noise, you know, with the music. It's about, I am like creating my own bubble within this larger bubble. Even if there's a ton of people around me, I'm in my own world right now. And so I'll do whatever I need to do to be in my own world. And that's something I do. And I think a lot of sensitive people do just in a social situation, right? Where I don't even notice I'm doing it, but I might get a lot quieter. And I'm the kind of person that I definitely like can play any role when I'm in a social setting, and people are always kind of confused. Like, are you an extrovert or an introvert? Because I can walk in a room and I can be the center of attention, you know, and I can like control the conversation and like be the big, bold personality. That's not what I prefer, but I absolutely can do that. And, you know, I can be very sociable and I'm good at networking and all that, but I also can very much be the very quiet person, just like not saying much and observing. And that's what I would prefer. But when I'm feeling overstimulated, I will just kind of go into my own vortex there, where other people are like, why is she so quiet? And I'm like, it's not about you. I'm just kind of just brought myself into my own vortex here with my own thoughts. And I often will use some type of like mantra or statement to ground myself in, just something that makes me feel good. Like I am love, or I am divine, or source is with me. Like I just like repeat something to myself, and I'm just kind of getting my own rhythm and my own bubble. And you know, sometimes I just kind of pop out of my body and observe from above.
Yeah.
And then like recenter and like pop myself back in. I'm like, okay. Because sometimes when I pop out, I can realize like where in the room is there an energy that's what exactly is overstimulating me. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at with creating my own vortex. Like, what is overstimulating me? Is there one person in the room that's like throwing a lot of energy everywhere? Is there one thing I'm picking up on really loudly? And is that trying to get my attention? Like, am I supposed to be aware of that?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm not, and it's just extra stuff, you know. But to be honest, now, if something is getting my attention, I'm supposed to know it. Like, I am so grateful that I'm at the place in my life where I can go into large crowds and seas of people and I can be fine. And for most of my life, I literally could not do that. Like, I was very concerned about my ability to like navigate the world. Like, because I just wanted to be alone in my room because I could not deal with all of the psychic stimulation and the sensory overload. And I had to learn to work with that. And I got to learn to control that and utilize that and have my on and off switches. And so I can go and just live my life, and I can go to concerts and like be in huge crowds and I don't get overwhelmed. And I know there are a lot of people that I think just use that as an excuse. And one of my friends, she said to me that one of her old mentors had said to her, there's no such thing as an empath. You just have bad boundaries. And I don't necessarily agree with there's no such thing as an empath, but I do agree if your excuse is that you're an empath, you just have bad boundaries. And if you are an empath, that is one of the core purposes of your life, to learn boundaries. And the people that will use excuse, I can't because I struggle with this. I can feel everybody's energy. I can hear their thoughts. Yeah. The hardest thing for you in your life is your mission to overcome. Like, that is the point. Yeah. So if you don't do it this lifetime, you're going to come back in and do it again. Like, the whole point is to learn boundaries, you know? And so I think that's such a core piece of, obviously, people who listen to our podcast are like very awake, aware, like tuned in. Like, these are the people that are struggling with that, can hear people's thoughts, feel everybody's energy. That doesn't mean you're never going to go in a situation and feel drained, you know? And that is probably the one manifestation where it will, like, in extreme situations, yes, I will hear what's going on because I need to be aware of more for my safety. Or if I'm in a group that I'm facilitating, so I'm aware. Or what will happen is, it's when I come home and I realize, wow, I'm really tired. It's more afterwards, but I'm fully able to like get in the middle of a sea of 10,000 people and like vibe, you know, like I can do that. And I couldn't before. And that's really important for us to learn, like that. Of course, like I came into this world feeling like the most sensitive person of all time, seeing, and it's not just feeling energy. Like, imagine seeing energy fields and other layers of reality. Like, I think when I talk about that, and that's not some, like, I'm saying that because I just want people to put things in perspective. Like, when you're seeing non-physical entities the same way I'm seeing you right now, like, and that's your life and all of the fields and layers of reality, I want you to imagine how much stimulation that is. Yeah. And hearing everybody's thoughts around you, obviously feeling every single emotion. Like, I thought I was going to combust. Like, as a young child, I thought I was going to die from it, like a million times over. And I'm like, if I can take all of that, because most people don't perceive even half of what I perceive, even when all of our psychic senses are on, because that is my big mission, is boundaries and taking control of that and learning to work with that. And because it's a gift, and it's kind of like, you know, the wild untamed horse, like we can rein it in and like use that power in a constructive way. But if I can do that, then you can, you can handle it too. And so that was a very convenient way for me when I was younger to hide from my mission and my purpose and the bigness of things that I want to do, and to hide from social interactions and things that would get me out of my comfort zone. I would use it as an excuse. And so now suddenly, when I've actually mastered that, I don't have that excuse anymore. And so I just have to face my own shit. And that's really powerful. That's a really powerful way to see the truth. So I just think that it's, and where we're at on a planet now, like this, when I talk about with the psychic development course and things like that, what I teach about energetics or psychic abilities, this isn't just for people who do this as their career. This is literally for everybody who's awake. Everybody who's awake, like everybody has these gifts, and it's going on whether or not you realize it, and suddenly you realize it. And you might not be like clairvoyant in the way I am, right? Or clairaudient. You might not, but you have those psychic abilities, and it's your responsibility to learn how to work with that, right? Like being a human, it's my responsibility to learn to brush my teeth, to take care of myself, to sleep enough. Like, this is just part of being a human. And to me, I just think it's part of our spiritual responsibility, our personal responsibility. We've got to learn to work with those gifts and our empathy and treat that like any other, I'm a human and have to learn how to cook for myself kind of skill. So I think this is important for everybody, to be honest, especially in an age where you open your phone and there's like a million weird energies flying your way. Yeah. Because I didn't know I was going to see that on my feed, and I didn't really want to deal with that. I'm like, whoa, right? I know. And that can really take a hold on you. So to me, this is like super important. I know that there's a lot of people that, again, in the spirituality space, are very anti-energetic protection. And that's okay if that's how people, you know, it's fine. Whatever you want to do. I just talk about what works for me and what has allowed me to like live the life that I want to live. And
I haven't heard that.
energetic.
Why would you not want to?
Well, the thing is that, I mean, I'm sure everybody has kind of a different argument. I've heard a lot of people, and I have close friends who are like, they're saying it's coming from fear.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And it's not. Well, maybe for some people it is. And I say this to people that I teach. I'm like, if it's coming from fear, then that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only way you can actually set your boundaries is when you're not in fear, like when you're in your power. And to me, again, this just mirrors, and honestly, it's usually the same people that I talk to. I'm just thinking in my head about who I know, who will have this conversation. They don't believe in that, who they have really awful boundaries in their life.
Yeah.
And they're the people that keep dating the narcissist, and this person stole that from them. It's like, yeah, because you don't have any sense of, this is my field and I'm calibrating it for what I am and am not available for. And there's also just the reality of, you can't control everybody else.
Yeah.
You can't control everybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to. I can't. But I can take responsibility for myself and my field. And really, that's about self-love. That's about how much I love myself. I'm going to look after myself. And that's also about me being very clear in how I want to affect and impact people. Like, that really is from love, 100%. So yeah, it does depend, the frequency you're setting the intention from, but I think it's really important.
Yeah.
So,
and like you said, I mean, it just goes back to responsibility. It's like if you have a car, right? Yeah, you know that like it may not be as likely, depending on where you are in the world, that someone is going to break into your car, but you're not going to leave it unlocked
100%.
just because. Or your
100%.
door. Oh, I don't have a front door because I just trust that the people in
Yeah.
my apartment complex are just not going to come in anytime. It's my responsibility, my own life, my own well-being. And if I live with anyone else or have children or a dog or whatever, it's my responsibility to take care of them. So when I lock the door every day, I'm not doing it out of fear. Like, oh, I hope no one tries to break in. I'm just like, this is probably a good idea to lock the door, you know? So yeah. I
calibrating
guess,
your field.
Exactly. But no, I love everything you said about that. And I think that it's just fascinating. Like, it's just fascinating to think about those things. And I think that my favorite thing about what you said was like the nuance and how sometimes you can feel extremely overstimulated in a situation where like maybe you normally wouldn't, or sometimes you can feel completely like amazing in a crowd of 10,000 people, you know? And I think that that's where like the juiciness and the depth comes from, because when you are having that feeling and that experience, you can go into it and you can say like, is there someone or something that I am supposed to be seeing, or like, where is it coming from? And that's actually an experience that I had, this weekend. I realized that something that I had kind of taken on as I've, quote, learned the like psychology and stuff about ADHD, which did serve me and help me for a long time, which, coincidentally, not coincidentally, was when I was also awakening spiritually, was about like the mirroring, right? And so, I'm mirroring people because, whatever, XYZ. And I'm like, well, it's the energy of people. I do notice, and a lot of times I do feel like I'm not being able to keep eye contact with people when I'm talking is like a classic psychology ADHD thing, whatever. I'm like, well, yeah, because a lot of other people are also like that and have this nervous energy and can't hold a conversation. And so, of course, if I'm talking to them, I'm feeling like that. And then suddenly when someone is in front of me, I met someone who was a friend of a friend that I just really connected with this weekend. And he would hold eye contact so lovingly. And I was like, just staring at his eyes the whole time. And I'm like, see,
but it's also now about the codes.
Well, yeah, that too.
We talked about, it's like there are certain people I don't have an eye contact problem, and there are certain people I'm like, I cannot look at you. I know, it's so, and I'm like, because you cannot see in my eyes.
Yeah, you're not allowed. Yeah.
So there's that.
Totally.
There's that piece too. But yeah, it is, the mirroring piece is important. And I think what I'll leave people with is, one of the most powerful things for me, my guides said to me one time, they were like, for the next week, nothing you feel is your own. And I don't think that's a way to live your life, because we also need to take responsibility for our own stuff. But for a week, I just said, what if I'm just assuming like none of it's mine? Yeah. I'm literally just like this vessel picking up on, because we are receiving information and sending information. We're just transmitting, right? In both ways. And what if I'm literally just only picking up signals? And that practice for that week, like that way of viewing things really shifted my life and really helped a lot with bigger picture, discerning what's mine and what's not. So that could be a practice for people, like just play with that for 3 days. What if nothing is your own? And that doesn't mean, you know, making a big deal out of it or any of that, but just to start to discern, if I have that perspective, how does that change how I relate to these emotions?
Absolutely.
So
I think that that's such an important one. I'm going to do that. You know, I was telling you a little bit earlier that for me, when I came to this concept at first, it felt a little bit like a cop out. I'm like, well, I have to take responsibility for my emotions. And so if I just say like, oh, well, this isn't mine, then maybe that I'm not taking responsibility enough. But it's like, as I've leaned into it more and really understood, like, when I can identify, like, I know exactly who this is coming from and I know that this isn't mine, it's been so freeing, because it's like, again, like I was saying, you know, at the very beginning, like, well, what if I just, okay, well, what if it is mine? I'm still going to transmute it, feel it to its depths, and like release it. So I can do that for others as well. And I don't have to have a story attached about it of like, which is what we do with our own emotions anyway. Like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. Why? Right? Yeah. It's just the emotion, not attaching our identity with it. But yeah, I think it's a good practice. I'm going to do that for sure.
Releasing attachment.
Yeah.
So there we go. I guess that's the theme, is releasing attachment and taking responsibility.
Yep.
All at the same time.
Yep.
All at the same time. Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
Of course.
For this
Thank
chat,
you.
and thanks for everybody listening, and we will catch you again next time.